Hello, good morning. Welcome to week 8's lecture. Today's discussion is about throughput accounting. As we mentioned before in our learning outcome, so we have um, the objective of achieving the understanding of some specialized techniques of accounting. So throughput accounting is part of that. Uh, so what are the objectives of this chapter specifically? So we will understand the concept of throughput. What does throughput actually mean? Understand the basics of theory of constraints. So basically, theory of constraint is the basis of throughput accounting. So what's the constraints? And understand the concept of throughput accounting. What is throughput and what is throughput accounting? And also how throughput accounting is different from contribution analysis that we discussed a week before. So let's start. Throughput. What is throughput actually mean? Meaning of throughput is output relative to input. So how much output we are providing to get how much output. Okay. So it actually signifies the amount of work done in a particular period of time. So what are the efforts we are making to get our output? What we are providing, what we are investing, and what we are receiving from that investment. Originally, throughput system has been developed in 1980s as a part of production management process, operations management process, which is actually being recognized as optimized production technology. Optimized production technology. What does that mean? It means what is the amount of production that will maximize the use of resources and based on which will provide maximum contribution or profits to the organization. Okay, so optimized production technology is the concept that profits are extended or expanded by increasing the throughput of the plant. That means how much the max we can use our resources, use our machineries, use our resources, that is labors, materials, based on which we would be able to maximize our profits. Throughput identifies or differentiates between the activities of the organization or resources of the organization. The resources what we have, for example, the resources that is labor is a resource, material is a resource, machine hour available to the organization are also resources. So the throughput or optimized production technology differentiates between the activities which are bottleneck activities or resources and non-bottleneck resources. So the aim is to identify the bottleneck and remove them or ensure they are fully utilized at all times. So what actually bottleneck activity mean? Bottleneck activity means which constraint our activity, which limits our production. Okay, so a bottleneck resource might be a machine whose capacity limits throughput of the entire production process. So for example, we have a machine, we have one or single machine that we use for our production process. We have lots of labor, we have lots of resources, that is materials, but because of the limitations of the capacity of the machine, we would not be able to increase our production. So if this is the case, then the machine is the bottleneck resource. Non-bottleneck resources should be operated or used based on the capacity of the machine. Though we have more material or labor, but we can't use those labor or material because of the machine. So we should use our materials and labor or other resources based on the bottleneck resource, the capacity of the machine. But if we wish, we can use more labor, we can use more materials, but those uses of those resources actually will gives us more inventory or work in process. Ultimately, we would not be able to get profit or revenue because of the limitations of the machine. We would not be able to get our finished goods done because of the constraints of the machine. That's the bottleneck resource. Work as a constraint limits our production process. So theory of constraints. What's theory of constraint? The process of maximizing the profits while faced with the bottleneck and non-bottleneck resources of operation. So theory of constraint is actually a constraint, okay, that we need to consider as the basis of utilizing other resources as well as the constraint resource. So in this case, we have to identify three measurements. Okay, throughput contribution. We have to calculate throughput contribution. So the throughput contribution is the rate at which the system or the process generate profit through sales. So if you sell the product, how much contribution you will get from that. That's the throughput contribution is being calculated based on the throughput resource, bottleneck resource, the limited resource. So if the machine hour is the limited resource, the throughput contribution is supposed to be calculated based on machine hour. If the material is the bottleneck resource, you have to calculate the throughput contribution ratio based on material. If the labor hour is the contribution constraint, then we have to calculate throughput contribution based on labor hour. The next measurement is the investment, a total of the stock, research and development cost, and the cost that we have to incur is the investment. Right. And other operational expenses, that includes all other operating expenses incurred to earn throughput contribution. So what are the other expenses which are being actually recognized as fixed costs that must be we have to meet, we have to achieve based on the contribution. Throughput accounting. Now come to accounting. What does throughput accounting mean? So it's a part of management accounting technique which identifies the constraint, the limiting factor in the production process and exploiting it to maximize profits. As we mentioned before, so throughput accounting is a part of management accounting tool, management accounting technique that is being used to identify what is our limiting factor, what is the constraint in our production process, in which factor or resource we have limitations. Okay, and based on these, we have to identify, we have to calculate the throughput contribution ratio. Okay, and based on which we have to determine how much of the other resources we can use. And also, this ratio or the throughput ratio will determine which product we should give emphasis on in our production decision. Which one should you produce first? Which one second? Which one third? So we will try to produce the product which will give you maximum profit or contribution. That would be your first preference. And then which one gives you the second highest amount of contribution? That would be your second preference, and third and fourth and so forth if you have. So throughput accounting um, is a technique that actually is being used to identify the limiting factor and the most appropriate optimum use of the limiting factor for maximizing the profits of the organization. Throughput accounting is an approach that provides management with decision support information for enterprise profitability improvement. This is what I'm discussing. So this approach actually identifies the limiting factor, and based on which we will try to use optimum use of the resources, maximum use of the resources. Ultimately, that will gives us maximum profit, improve the performance of the organization. So as I mentioned before, what we have to do, we have to calculate throughput accounting ratio, TA ratio, throughput accounting ratio, to rank the products, to identify the products, which one we should give preference, which one we should produce first, second, third. Okay, so the return per factory hour, if you say the factory hour, machine hour is the limiting factor, so we have to identify the return contribution per factory hour and cost per factory hour. So what is the return? Return is the contribution per factory hour. And the contribution calculation is different here than the cost volume profit analysis that we did before. In cost volume profit analysis, the contribution that we have calculated was sales price minus variable cost, all variable cost. But in case of throughput accounting ratio, we have to calculate contribution, throughput contribution equal to sales price minus material cost only. Okay. And cost, total factory cost per time available based on the total, bottleneck resource, and the material based on the bottleneck resource. So as I mentioned before, this is a little bit different than contribution analysis that we did before. It's cost volume profit analysis and throughput accounting. Simple contribution analysis and throughput accounting differs in terms of their definition of variable cost. In case of throughput accounting, only material is being considered as variable cost, only material. Okay, but in case of cost volume profit analysis, all variable expenses are being recognized as variable cost. All right. So it's 14 minutes almost. So I would like to stop here and see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.